Good evening and welcome to the Monday, May 13, 2013 Board of Education meeting. I'd like to begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3 on the agenda is traditionally at this time of year we recognize via the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education 2 outstanding students that are in Guilford High School, and I'd like to ask Mr. Macenti if he would please to come forward and introduce the recipients.
Oh, what the heck. I know them too well. Michael Berger, will you come on up here? Carolyn Duman, come on up here. Dr. Freeman, that's for you right there.
It's not Tuesday. I should have worn one.
You know, Michael's a member of National Honor Society, Spanish Honor Society, plays on our baseball team, is running our track team, president of the senior class, president of the student council. You know, just a real strong candidate to be a very productive citizen in life after Guilford. You know, the slacker, the guy, he got into Stanford in California, he gets into Harvard, he gets into Yale. He's got some big choice to make, and he went to the dark side, Harvard. But, you know, his brother goes to Yale, so there'll be some battles in the house. But I'm going to tell you a little story about Michael, and that'll speak volumes. I mean, academically, he's in the top 5 in our class, and he just does a great job. He's just a wonderful representative for our school. But I'll never forget, you know, here's a guy that's president of the senior class, president of the student council, and I'll never forget when he came to me about two years ago, and he was running for office, and he missed a deadline, and we withdrew his application. And I remember we sat down, and I tried to explain to him, you know, why he wasn't going to be running for office. And, you know, somebody would have just, you know, hung their head and gone on and maybe let it affect them. And he didn't. He was resolved to even do more. And he came back to be elected to the leadership positions that he has now in class. So, you know, here's a guy that just persevered and really moved forward. So we're really going to miss him, and congratulations on your honor. Carolyn Duman. I can't tell you how many times I've said that name over the intercom or just in you know, in educational circles here at our school. She's going to be our salutatorian and you know, captain of the cross country team, member of the state championship on the cross country team, a member of the top 6 seniors in this year's graduating class. In fact, Michael was selected as well. So in the New Haven Register, when they do their senior spotlight between June and November, you'll see their pictures as well, both of them. But Carolyn, salutatorian, is going to Johns Hopkins, and I can't say enough about her. She's really respected by her peers. Member of the Latin Honor Society, National Honor Society, French Honor Society. She's just everywhere and everything to everybody here at our school, and we're really going to miss her when she moves on. And I can't think of 2 finer, arguably 2 finer seniors in our class to represent this school in the CABE Award. So congratulations to you, Carolyn, as well.
Mike, on behalf of the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education and on behalf of the entire Guilford Board of Education, you have been a contributor to our meetings for the last year. We have valued your advice, your observations, your source of information on our policies and some of the things we're trying to do as a Board of Education. You've been a great contributor to the entire Guilford community. I know it's just starting, and I urge you to keep our phone number as you move on to Harvard and keep us up to date. We expect great things out of you.
Thank you so much.
And Carolyn, same thing on behalf of the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education and the Guilford Board of Education. You've been a tremendous contributor to the Guilford community as well. Both of you have had not many years here compared to some folks, but you've already made a lasting contribution to the entire Guilford community, and we deeply appreciate what you've done, and we wish you the best of luck at Johns Hopkins and a great school, both of you great schools, and we very much appreciate and value your contributions. So thank you and again, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
They have a medical school at Johns Hopkins, don't they?
It's reported that I think Harvard has one also, but I'm not sure about that.
Well, that's outstanding. I mean, you know, we are really fortunate that we have people that care, young people who care so much about the community and about the environment in the school, and have worked so hard to become leaders within their class. And so very, very grateful for their work and very happy to recognize them on behalf of the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. Now we go to the mundane, Mr. Stackenmeyer.
Yeah.
The action on the minutes of April 8 and April 22. Is there a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Second. Any changes, corrections?
On the April 22nd minutes, at the very, very top, it says Catherine. It should say Kathleen, Dallas Tracy, or Katie. Either one is fine.
All right. Anything else?
In general, I just wanted to say that I'm very pleased with the thoroughness of our minutes. They really are outstanding, so I want to thank again the Secretary. We talked about the same thing in the Finance Committee.
And they go far beyond what the law requires, which is fine. It's a good thing. But anyway, so there's a motion and a second. Any other changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Ms. Renner, you're the approver of or the reviewer anyway.
Reviewer
the board
of the
is
month.
The approver.
That's right. During the month of April, we expended $4,095,810.67, and that's the amount that we'll be voting on tonight. So far for the year, we've expended approximately 72% of our budget. Last year at this time, we had spent 74% of our budget, so we're right about on track with last year. For the most part, in the main budget categories, the percent of budget expended does approximate what it was last year. The only area I see where we're noticeably ahead of last year is the purchase services category, which includes things like legal services and special services. Those are both areas that we expect to be a little bit over budget. And in that category, we're at 80% for the year compared to 75% last year. We do expect to have some money left in our budget at the end of the year. It's pretty close, but we do expect to have some left to return to the town. And in fact, I've been told that possibly as early as tomorrow, we're considering releasing some of the funds that were frozen. So that's great news. And in the subcommittee, we discussed a number of the specific expenditures. We went through the bills one by one. We spent a lot of time talking about the thought process when things were originally budgeted. So are there any questions about the bills or the budget report?
If you're from normally last year at 74, now we're at 72, was the other way around. Right, we're lower this year at this point in time. What are the ones that are lower? If you said there was a couple that are above, do you know which ones are, like, seem to be coming in a little lower?
Site improvements.
Site improvements.
Is lower right now, to name one.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. Is there a motion to approve April's expenditures?
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you. Item 6 on the agenda is public forum for topics on the board agenda. Does anybody wish to be heard at this time? Doesn't look like it. All right. 7, communications. I've actually had a quiet month. I don't know about you all.
Very quiet.
All right. Student representatives, what would you like to tell us?
We move down to the microphone.
Oh, sure.
It's been in the budget for a couple of years now. There it goes.
All right, so the year's slowly starting to wind down for us, although things are still at a pretty quick pace. We're trying to keep up with everything, but so the senior activities are starting to come around the corner, where we're looking forward to our senior outing day on the next week on Friday. Prom is coming up, and a bunch of other senior field trips that generally we don't get until this last year, but we're looking forward to that.
Oh, and as many of you know, during 2 weeks ago, we had the musical that I starred in, the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. That was a great success for everybody, including the audience members and everyone. And so it was very fun experience to be involved. So I greatly enjoyed it.
Definitely say I enjoyed seeing it. Hope you all did who saw it too.
It's great.
It was a great,
It was fantastic.
So also right now we're working around the AP test revised schedule, which is both in your final year a blessing and a curse, because we definitely needed the extra time, but it's still looming to the end of May. So I'm still definitely glad that we had the extra time. That worked out very well for us, especially with some certain classes. Also, the junior prom committee members who came here last year to voice their desire to have junior prom being able to be moved off campus would like to just pass on that prom was a great success. The price actually stayed the same for the tickets, and they had a great time. So they just wanted to thank you for hearing them out on that, because they really appreciate it.
Where was it held, Mike?
Woodwind.
I think it was Woodwind. Yeah.
That's
Great.
Yeah. So nobody showed up in a limo, so it saved them.
So the valedictorian and the salutatorian were picked. As you know, Carolyn Duman's the salutatorian, and Jackson Maycor, who is going to attend the University of Chicago next year, is our valedictorian. So we're very excited for both of them. Very glad.
Also, amidst all the numerous activities that are going to be going on the next few weeks, is Mr. Merceni informed us that we're going to start the groundbreaking for the new school on June 6th, where he's going to call everybody out from high school to see the event get started. So unfortunately, one of those senior field trips is that day, so a few of us will not be there, but definitely want to be there in spirit.
Maybe we can Skype or something.
Never know. Yeah. That's all we have for you tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions? Comments? Thoughts? All right. Well, thank you very much.
I'd just like to say one more time, thank you very much for the award. I really appreciate it.
You know, there's some things that that you earn. It's not that it's not a coincidence that you're recognized. That things like that don't happen by accident. And and I think that the recommendation and the decision of the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, you know, we have a little bit to say in it, and as you might imagine, and I think they made a terrific decision.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
So we're up to the superintendent's report already.
And
interestingly enough, we have some pretty fascinating educational-related topics on the agenda tonight with your report.
It's actually a really exciting report tonight. We've been looking forward to tonight's meeting. I do want to start with the overnight field trip. We've got a piece of information in your packet for an overnight field trip that is planned to Austria and the Czech Republic for next April. It will involve 2 days of missed school. I know Mr. Masenti and I see that Mr. Gom are here in the audience tonight if there are questions from the board regarding that trip.
Anybody have any questions?
Overnight means more than one night, right?
Right.
Okay, just checking.
To Europe. It'd be kind of hard not to do that.
Yeah, well, I thought they were down.
All right.
Sounds like a wonderful
It's
trip.
a wonderful
Sounds like a great
opportunity for our
opportunity.
students.
And we would love to have a report back when you return. Tell us the highlights. We always say that, but few people come back.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear what went on some of the trips.
Want a highlight
We would
reel?
enjoy it.
A highlight reel?
You could do that too, yes.
Okay. Do we need to move on that?
I believe we need board
Okay.
approval. Yep.
All right. Then is there a motion that we approve the overnight field trip request?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also want to take a few minutes just to update the board on the Institute for Learning annual conference that took place just last week. Mrs. Brown and Mr. Bowden and Dr. Keene and I had the opportunity to all attend this conference last week. And there were a couple highlights to the event that I do want to share with you. One, it was a fantastic opportunity for the new team to get away from Guilford and to really engage in some in-depth learning together. And as a team building exercise, I think it was very good for us to be away and to really roll up our sleeves and focus on teaching and learning. It was the focus of the 3 days. The theme for the conference was in fact building understanding through writing and talk, much of the conference focused on the shifts within the Common Core state standards and the shift towards greater degrees of explaining your own thinking, collaborating together through talk and through communication in general. Mr. Bowden and Mrs. Brown were able to attend some sessions on leadership. We were able to meet and work with the executive director of Edutopia, an organization that is funded by George Lucas. We were able to spend some time with Lauren Resnick and talk about our teacher evaluation and how that can roll out in our district and continue to support the values that we've worked on and that we've partnered with IFL. Dr. Keene and I were able to roll up our sleeves, slightly uncomfortable territory for me, but to work on math instruction for the week, to really focus on how we can build our math curriculum and how we can support the shifts within the Common Core and all students within the mathematic instruction here in the district. We were able to be part of a presentation where Chapel Hill was highlighted for the work that they do in their district, and a very successful young superintendent who's working in that district. But I think most importantly, or at least most exciting for all of us, was a session that focused on talk in the classroom and how talk can move classroom instruction and how talk can move learning for students at all levels in the classroom. It focused on a 4th grade unit built around child labor across the world, and in the middle of the presentation, students from Guilford Public Schools, from Jones Elementary School were highlighted. Teacher Lindsay Fiorentino in her classroom working with Guilford students, and to watch those students held up as an example of how to do this right, and to watch their thinking on display, because the conversations they were engaging in was really just revealing the thought process. It was revealing how they were wrestling with the content and the actual understandings that they were building there in the moment. To watch Dr. Keene wiping a tear from the corner of her eye as that rolled out, and then to sit back and listen to the debrief, because what happened next was a room full of educators that include people from New York City, San Juan, California, Akron, Ohio, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, to listen to them then deconstruct and unpack what they saw in that video, and to listen to them annotating a 30-page transcription of what was happening in that setting was just the highlight of the trip and validation of years of work going on. We have a copy of that videotape. I know that we've shared copies with Mrs. McCarthy already, and we're planning on bringing that to all of you in the workshop later this month so that you can have a chance to see that transcription and see those students at work and see the level of work that's taking place in the Guilford schools. It really was a very special moment to be there and watch that unfold in front of a national group of educators, and watch how they recognized what was happening and wanted to know what they can do in their districts to have more of that take place there, and then push us on how we can take it even further. We didn't just we didn't sit there and get pats on the back. We immediately talked about what it takes to get to the next level and what it takes to go further with that sort of learning. I don't know if either of you wanted to add to that report, Dr. Keene?
I think you covered it pretty well, and yes, I did get all teary. It was very, very rewarding to see kind of the fruits of the labor, you know, in the children. But we did have, I think, a successful 3 days of very, very hard work, but it was rewarding work. And we did have an opportunity to meet in small groups just to talk about what we need to do in Guilford, and we had some technical support around our work around assessment, our work around mathematics and professional development, and we were able to sit down just with the fellows and some of the experts from the university and really just talk about Guilford, and that was very, very rewarding.
Questions?
I also wanted to give the board a brief update on the multi-age classroom at Lakes. I know that we had spoken about this at our last meeting. At that point, Mrs. Hale and I had opened up a conversation about possibly sunsetting the multi-age classroom at Lakes for next year. We had then brought the community in and listened to parents, both current and former parents of students who had been in those multi-age classrooms, to get a better perspective of their questions, their suggestions, and what they would like to see continue. Following that meeting, Mrs. Hale met with staff at Lakes School, looked at the schedule, tried to unpack the feedback that we had received from the Lakes community, and I think it was just last week, I think it was a week ago tonight, we met at Lakes again, invited community members to come in and talked about a revised plan for moving forward, which in fact I think the Lakes staff deserves a great deal of credit for, because in my mind it meets all the needs that were sort of voiced both from the district and school side as well as from the parent side. When we initially looked at changing the structure around those classes next year, Mrs. Hale and I both had concerns around being able to distribute changing enrollment numbers in different classes equitably and balancing that distribution across different classrooms. We were also looking for ways to tie all the teachers to a grade level PLC so that they could work collaboratively and be supported by professionals in general, because it's the right thing to do, but particularly currently as we've got some other significant initiatives that are on our plate. The parents, while they shared a number of questions and concerns, I think primarily focused on the fact that they were very appreciative of the opportunity for first and second graders to come together and have opportunities during a school day where kids from different grade levels could interact, and in fact second graders could have the opportunity to be mentors to younger students. The work that the staff at Lakes did, going back and revisiting their schedule, brings forward an opportunity next year to have all of those things. So we will be able to continue to have an opportunity for first and second graders to be in adjoining classrooms. During every single day, there is time in both the morning and the afternoon for those students to come together in a mixed class arrangement. It's not being dictated how often or in what ways they will come together, but those teachers will have the opportunities to mix those students cross-grade. And at the same time, the schedule has been modified to a degree that it allows each of those teachers to be fully embedded in one of the grade level PLCs, one a first grade member, one a second grade member, and it allows us to look at the classes as a standalone first and a standalone second, and therefore distribute the students evenly across all the first grade sections, all the second grade sections. While you just got a 90-second overview of that, we spent about an hour with graphics of what the schedule looks like currently, what the schedule could look like next year, going through that information with parents who came out, answering questions, and at the end of the meeting asking them if they felt that this was a solution that met everybody's needs, and in fact telling them that I would implicate them in this decision tonight with the Board of Education, and we got a strong sense of support from the room. They thought that this was responsive to the conversation that had been raised at Lakes, and they were very appreciative and supportive of the movement that we made. And I just need to applaud Mrs. Hale and her staff for also listening to their community and coming up with a response and a solution that meets the needs the school was experiencing, as well as being responsive to what their community asked them to continue to support. We will continue to look at and think about multi-age. We've also tried to be very clear in communications, both at the meeting and that went out in writing later this week, that we're not sure it's going to stay like this forever. And in fact, there should be opportunities to be critical, but also opportunities to maybe grow and enhance the qualities that we see in multi-age that those parents are so passionate about. So when there is a request for first graders to participate in next year's program, we want to be very clear that we're continuing to look, we're continuing to think. Ms. Hale, her staff, and I want to continue to look at it, and we will be sure to include the Lakes community voice and parent voice in that conversation next year as we move forward. So I just wanted to bring some closure to that conversation that we had opened at our last meeting. And Dr. Balistraci was able to join us for that meeting on Monday evening as well.
Okay.
Thank
Questions, comments, anything? No, I think I just want to reinforce the message that it's okay to, upon further review, change your mind. It's we want to encourage, particularly in circumstances where the community is or a substantial part of the community is concerned about a particular outcome. We never want to encourage you, discourage you from saying maybe we should step back and take another look at this and change. And that's terrific.
There are a few decisions I found that are carved in stone, and few that can't be improved by additional conversation and additional input. And again, I just really want to applaud Mrs. Hale and the whole Lake staff, particularly the Guiding Coalition, group of teachers who are representative of the whole school, who really rolled up their sleeves and essentially said, what is it that we were looking to achieve here, and what have we heard from our community, and how can we respect and honor both of those? And they did a fantastic job being creative and doing both of those.
Great.
Thank you very much. Particularly excited about tonight's, the next topic on tonight's report. In February, Mrs. Brown joined us as the new Director of Special Education. She has been meeting with principals. She has been meeting with special education staff. She and I have been talking extensively. And she was asked to come in and take a fresh look at the futures report and at our process here in the Guilford Public Schools. She came to us when the special education budget for next year was essentially complete and was moving forward. But as we have looked at the services that we provide, at the students that we support through the special education budget, she's asked a lot of really challenging questions. She has brought experience and suggestions, and we would like to give you an update on where we see ourselves in special education this year, our planning moving forward. Many of the themes are themes that you've heard me discuss with you, but they'll be discussed much more thoroughly and knowledgeably tonight, now that Mrs. Brown is with us, and a suggestion for reallocating some of the dollars that we have in that special education budget already approved for next year, but already with different ideas about how we can use those dollars more efficiently, more effectively, and to better serve our students moving forward. So with all of that, I want to look to the audience and invite Mrs. Brown to come and join us at the podium. And we'll give her a clicker.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. As Dr. Freeman noted, I have a lot of information to share with you, and I'm actually very, very excited about this information. Dr. Freeman mentioned that I've been working alongside administrators, some teachers, and also some parents, and some of them are actually here tonight because I feel like some of their input is some of the most valuable input, because usually we're programming and thinking about their children when we're making all of these decisions. So, and ultimately that's what we're here for. So tonight I have a presentation I want to share with you. Basically the goal of the work that I've been doing since I've been here was to take the futures report, look at how we're providing services for students here in Guilford, and to look to see if we couldn't redesign or reallocate the way we're providing services to create a continuum of services. By a continuum of services, I mean providing not just all students in the classroom or all students outplaced that need special programming, but looking at different programming, different services, and different supports to ensure that we're meeting students' individual needs. To that end, some of my first impressions is that Guilford, although their IEPs and their programs, people work very, very hard, and they really work hard to meet individual children's needs. We've sort of been we sort of had a lack of those resources available and those supports available. So in looking at that and looking how we can identify what we would need to more effectively service students, we've been able to redesign some of the way we've been providing services and looking at those services. Oh, whoops, I forgot I was doing this myself, sorry about that. This slide here is going to illustrate for you a little bit about our goals and how we're going to accomplish these things. One of the main goals around doing this is, quite frankly, I feel that our certified staff, our related services personnel, our administrators can provide most of the services in Guilford better than they can at some of the outplaced agencies and organizations. Certainly that doesn't mean there isn't a need for outplacements at times, but they're certainly not meant to be a place for students to go and sort of never return to their community, because ultimately all of our students belong to this community and will be here in the future in the days to come. So basically, in order to do this, we needed to really look at what type of services and supports we're providing right now for our students in Guilford, and how we could possibly bolster those local supports and build capacity, create resources to look at those students pre-K through 12 and to provide services here in our school, our own schools. In order to do this, though, of course, being the Director of Special Services, I certainly want to be financially responsible in looking at this, because we all know that certainly increasing staffing and increasing resources possibly can can influence our budget. And that was not something that we were really willing to compromise. The budget was made, and we wanted to look at how we could be more creative and innovative in looking at our resources. Some of the ways we started to do that is we started to look at the current designs and the current systems that were in place, and if they were best practice, and if they were providing the most appropriate education or an appropriate education for our students in the least restrictive environment. And I'm certain probably many of you have heard some of those terms, but certainly feel free to stop me if there's something that you don't understand. In the least restrictive environment just simply means that they're educated as much as possibly with their non-disabled peers, and that they have access to the curriculum that regular education students have access to. One of the things that the Futures Report recommended is that we think about a little bit how we're using our paraprofessional supports and if we're using them most effectively. When we look at our paraprofessional supports, we understand the value of those supports. One of the things I'm starting to ask teams to do is when they allocate or when they recommend para supports, to also develop goals around those supports, similar to the way you would develop a goal around any support or service that you provide for a student. You know, we want to create independence with students, so there should be exit criteria when we're using a support such as that. One of the things that we were able to do is to look at how we might hire certified staff and replace some of those certified staff and redesign the structures of how our students are placed and scheduled to more effectively use our resources, and therefore be able to spend more funding and more resources on actual certified teachers. And that's really important because, first of all, it's best practice, but second of all, because then we can have dedicated teaching time by strategy specialists who are certified in our classrooms more time. So that's one of the reasons why we're moving towards that. So essentially, developing this continuum of services, we set out to accomplish a couple of things. We set out to be budget neutral. We wanted to not impact the budget. We also wanted to better provide better programs and more efficiently use our resources. So these are some of the programs that we're working on and some of the programs that we created. And I do have to recognize and thank the administrators that are here tonight, and even if there's some who aren't, as well as some of the parents that are here tonight, because they've helped to work either in committees, through phone calls, emails, looking at what we're currently doing and trying to identify how we might be able to do things better. And they've been wonderfully supportive, and so I'm really happy that I've had the opportunity to work with them so far. So I'm just going to walk you through some of these programs, and certainly if you have more questions about them, I'm certain that if you'd ever want to visit any of these programs, some of them are in still the planning processes, some of them are up and running, and some of them will be running for the fall. But essentially, the Bright Connections program, which you're all familiar with, I know some parents have spoken to you. Dr. Freeman has talked a lot about that program. It's terribly successful. The parents are very excited about it, and the kids are doing really well. And that program is right now located at Lakes with Jill. The next program that we're looking to institute is considered a neurodevelopmental supports program at Leeds. This program basically for next year is going to meet a need for some of our pre-K students who are coming into kindergarten. There's 4 and possibly 5 students that would benefit from this type of service, as opposed to doing an AM kindergarten program and the exact same PM kindergarten program. Although repetition is important, there's very specific research-based interventions and instructional methods that can really target some of our students that would fit into this category and that would profile as learners that would that this type of program would support. So essentially, this program will have some related services attached to this program, as well as a certified teacher. There will be some professional development, and this is one of the programs that I just want to highlight that some of the parents here in the audience have been very helpful in brainstorming ideas and looking at research and bringing some experts in to advise us in moving forward. So that's exciting.
Can I ask a question about that? So that would be housed at LEAP, but that would be a town-wide.
Absolutely. All these programs are considered to be town-wide, and that's one of the things I worked really hard with the principals about deciding and trying to allocate where certain programs would be. And basically, the decisions were made based on staffing, based on scheduling, based on space, based on what would work best for the children that would be involved in there. And you know, there were pros and cons to many of the different locations, and none of these necessarily are set in stone for life. So just so you understand that.
Along with that, so if somebody's in North Guilford, a student's in North Guilford, and kind of the neurodevelopmental program's right for them, do we actually bus them from North Guilford down to LEAP? Is that?
Absolutely, and the best part about it is that's a much shorter ride than having to bus them to Milford or Wallingford.
I did okay.
Or where some of the other
Okay.
where some of these other programs are located.
Yep.
And also, it's nice to create that community where kids can participate in their own schools. So in the morning, they would attend a regular kindergarten classroom with their peers, and in the afternoon, they would have very specific interventions and instructions that would target their needs. The next program, Bright Connections, would at Baldwin. In our current Bright Connections program, we have a couple of students who are third graders this year, being fourth graders next year, and so being fifth graders the following year. So our goal for this program is to expand what's happening right now at the elementary level to the middle school level. And essentially, some of those same team members are one of our BCBAs who's currently working in that program will be instrumental in helping us to move that forward and expand that programming. That program, we're hoping for it to start in the fall, but it may work better for it to start in January, so I'll just keep you updated as we move forward with that. The next two programs, the next two programs. This was an area or a group of students that was identified as needing something a little different than a traditional 6-hour day school, regular classroom experience. And typically, these children, or students I should say, were placed out because of behaviors, emotional needs, school anxiety, school avoidance, those types of behaviors. And it seems to be a trend that this is a bigger population that had been in the past. And certainly, after talking with some of the parents and some of the students, they really want to be here in Guilford, and we feel as though bringing in a behavior consultant, bringing some resources here, making these programs fluid where students can access them when they need them, but also have access to the regular curriculum is so important to their success, not just now, but in the long term. And so these two programs will allow us to bring some students back who have been outplaced, whose parents have said, who some of the older kids who are in high school have said, well, I probably wouldn't have gone out if there had been another program or support there. And their teams have agreed with that too. So we're looking at that also. Both of those programs will begin in the fall, and we're hiring a teacher for each of those programs along with some behavioral support for those programs. The alternative high school program here at Guilford High School is a program that Rick and his team have worked very hard on. We've included this because it does fit into our continuum of service, but it's essentially a regular education program. This program will be typically for students who are a little bit older because there is a large vocational piece in that program. And then the Strive program, which I think you may have heard a little bit about, but this is a very exciting program because in the past we actually in Guilford did not service any students in the age group of age 18 to 21. All of those students were placed either with an agency or a school outside of the Guilford Public Schools. And this program will target students ages 18 to 21. It'll be a life skills curriculum along with a vocational component. And as you know, it's a collaborative between Madison, Guilford, and Clinton. So that gives you a little bit of a little idea of the work that we've been doing and sort of the program creation to create that continuum of services here in Guilford. Do you have any questions about that? Okay. So the results of this work have allowed us to really look at and target what's happening outside of the Guilford Public Schools and where our students are and sort of how they're doing there. Obviously, each plan is individualized. Each plan is created to support those students' needs. Certainly, our goal is not to bring students back where it wouldn't be successful, but we have been able to identify 8 to 10 students who can successfully come back if the right supports are in place. The supports that we had just talked about. So right now we're currently in that planning process, attending those planning and placement team meetings, creating those IEPs, and programming these students for what fits them in terms of those supports. However, as you saw or started to see, and I passed a form out, or a sheet rather, that kind of gave you an idea of how we're changing and reallocating and redesigning our staffing and our resources. Did it come all the way around? Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I'll get it.
Apologize about that.
Kept you focused on
But in order for these programs to be successful, we want to make sure that we create in Guilford the resources as well as build the capacity of our own people in order to effectively program for these students.
Just to give an idea, 8 to 10 students out of district, how many are totally out of district now?
When I came here, we had 37. I think one moved away in the time being.
So it's about a third.
I thought that was...
What's that?
About 25%.
Yeah, which
targeting?
yeah, which is high.
No, I mean, you're targeting, the 8 to 10 is 25% of the outplacements.
Oh, right.
Yes.
I can give you a minute to look at that, and then we can just talk for a minute how what this means. So essentially, our goal is to hire 5.5 certified special education teachers for the 2013-2014 school year. Again, the rationale behind that is because our certified teachers can spend more dedicated teaching time with the Common Core coming online, and what we're now asking our students to do in rigorous environments. Having a special ed teacher in the classroom more of the time will allow us to differentiate better, to provide for both sides of the spectrum, essentially. Because certainly regular ed teachers and special ed teachers, when working in co-teaching relationships, are equally responsible for all the kids in their classrooms. And so allowing them, instead of going in for a half an hour, pull out for a half an hour, into another class for a half an hour, giving them some dedicated time, an hour and a half, 2 hours of true teaching time, will first allow them to develop those partnerships with their general education teacher, as well as help them to understand the curriculum that they're working with better, as well as helping them be a strategy specialist, which typically is good for all kids, but essential for some of the students in those environments. We're going to be eliminating 4 paraprofessionals, and some of those are retirements too, so that may come out very even. But really the reason for that is because of the way we've redesigned, we're able to support our students with certified teachers as opposed to the paraprofessionals in some situations. We are going to be hiring a .25 speech, a .2 OT in terms of related services, and those are mostly targeted at that neurodevelopmental program. Some of the specialties that we're hoping that these people have are a little bit targeted towards that type of program. As well as a .9 mental health, which will include possibly an outside consultant in terms of a behaviorist and or a school psychologist or social worker. That still is in the plans. And then we're going to increase the .5 special ed coordinator that is currently in the 2013-2014 budget to a .5, because helping to monitor and supervise these programs will be essential to their success. You have some questions about that?
Well, I mean, I think the obvious question is that I think we all agree and support the concept of bringing children back into the district, and it's something we've certainly heard over and over and over again from parents, that as long as the services were here, they'd rather have their children here,
Absolutely.
Right? Of course.
Well, it's what's best for everybody.
The obvious, I think the somewhat obvious question is that if there is a staffing increase as reflected here, I'm sure that you understand that there would need to be a fairly high degree of confidence that there would be a corresponding reduction in the outplacement tuition line, because it would not be a good place for us to do this, to roll forward in the budgets in years further and then have the outplacement line the same as it is now.
Right.
So why don't,
Absolutely.
if you could reassure us about that.
So let me click forward. Essentially, we're going to say the budget's going to be budget neutral for this year. I'm actually anticipating a decrease in the tuition and transportation line. I think that we're hesitant to say exactly what that number would be at this point, but certainly we'll bring that information to you as soon as it's available. There are still a few students that we're planning for, but I can assure you that there is no impact to the 2013-2014 budget. In fact, I anticipate that there being a positive impact to this budget.
We are confident that we can make the changes presented tonight within the existing budget, and in fact, optimistic that there would be a balance after making those changes. And to me, the real value is that the dollars that are currently leaving this community in the form of tuition checks that are being written to outside agencies are turned around and reinvested back into this school system, building a capacity to keep our children from pre-K all the way through age 21, rather than sending those dollars out. Not only are we confident that we can stay within budget, but that this move will save money moving forward and avoid other expenses moving forward as the next group of children come forward with needs on the autistic spectrum, or neurodevelopmental concerns, or behavioral and emotional concerns. We will now have programs in place that will meet the needs of those students without having to contract those outside services.
Right. Exactly. That's just what I was going to say. The best part about this, it's almost, building a system that once you create these programs, then they're there. And then we have the capacity, we have the supports in place. It's not an emergency knee-jerk, where can we put this student, where can we place this child? We have a way to sort of increase support when needed and decrease supports when needed. So if we have a student that is really struggling and is very challenging, we can say, wait a minute, let's slow this process down and look at creatively how we can program here with the supports we have. And certainly, like I said, that doesn't mean that I'm never going to come to you and say we had to outplace a student, but it makes it the last option as opposed to one of the only options. And philosophically, that's best I guess if I say philosophically, I guess it's my opinion, but that's what's best for kids, but best practice also shows that's what's best for kids. That's what IDEA wants us to do and wants us to look at. And, certainly these children are, once they come back from their outplacement, whether they're 10 or 21, they're going to be parts of our community, whether it be Guilford or a similar community. And the more exposure they have, the more access they have to their community in this learning environment, the better and more productive they'll be able to be.
How are we at?
I'm sorry.
How are we at capacity in terms of, obviously you get students coming in and coming out during the year. Okay, so the program you've actually put together, you said, you just mentioned, can handle some movement within it. How are we, does this plan kind of break at some point? All of a sudden 5 students show up that you need to deal with, that you can't deal with within this program? I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Right,
In terms
and it could, and it would lead to mid-year corrections that could look different than the mid-year corrections that we are used to. If we had a student who moved in, or if we had a family who moved in with 2 or 3 youngsters who all had a similar need in the middle of the school year, we might be coming to the board saying, we've got an unanticipated increase in this program and the needs in this program, and we're going to need to increase staffing and supports around this program. What we say now is students have moved in and we're going to overspend the tuition budget because they've moved in, we didn't anticipate their needs, and we're going to outplace those students. So the flexibility that you build in is that they're local staffing decisions. In any given year, we may see a population in one of these areas decrease, and you may see it increase in another one, and you may have to make staffing adjustments to meet those. But we'd be making local staffing adjustments as we do in class sizes and class assignments now with regular education teachers, as opposed to making adjustments to the tuition budget, which in our history have only gone in one direction. We've only adjusted in one direction. We've never adjusted in another.
So I guess the question is, where do we see that point? And I know we don't have enough experience with it and probably not enough data to understand how the dynamics work within the movement of students coming in and out. But I'm just curious, have you done, and this comes also into longer term planning, obviously, in terms of students coming in, students moving out, where's our capacity, what do we have to change, how are we dynamically adjusting as we start moving forward, okay, with these types of programs?
I think all these types of programs have to be monitored on a continuous basis. We have to look at the students and the needs of those students at the time that we are programming and moving forward. In terms of a capacity, many of these programs, the students aren't in that classroom all day long, so they actually have more capacity than you would think than possibly a typical classroom, because of the fluidity of these classes. Even though there may be 10 kids in that classroom who have some significant needs, they may not be accessing that classroom all at the same time. There may be a student, for example, in one of the therapeutic programs that needs a check-in in the morning and a check-in in the afternoon, and pretty much he goes on his way. But there may be other students that need to be programmed for more time in that. So that will have to be a continued monitoring, and I'll be working very closely with the coordinators and the administrators for that feedback and that input all the time. Again, like like Dr. Freeman said, our hope is that we would increase our own local capacity in staffing, whether it's bringing a consultant for something that we can't seem to, target on our own, or it's, one of our professionals being able to meet that need. But again, this doesn't mean that there will never be an outplacement again. Certainly, that's not the goal. The goal is to better use our resources and to better service students.
So I'll rephrase that a little bit.
Okay,
so what concerns you the most?
Oh, I'm like thrilled about this. This is the work I love to do. I mean,
where's the biggest concern, the biggest risk at this particular point with these programs?
I'll speak to that. I'll speak to our commitment to meeting the needs of the students and doing it really well. We are bringing these services in-house, and therefore we're accepting the responsibility to meet the needs of these kids and to do it at really high quality. If we do it really well, you're going to see that our capacity is going to grow, and we're going to see other parents who continue to have students outplaced, or parents who are going to come in with students with needs, and they're not going to be having the outplacement conversation, because the conversation around town is going to be that it's getting done really well and you don't have to look for that option. To me, my biggest worry is that we implement this and that we do this really well with really high quality, because otherwise we will be making an investment in these programs and still struggling trying to convince people that they want to come back. And I'll use Bright Connections as an example of how that can be done really well. We had a group of really invested teachers and support folks on the ground level at the building who were invested in this rollout from the beginning. We had a principal who came on board and supported it and was very much involved. We had a special education office coordinator and then new director who were, and the parents you heard come out and speak to you during the budget process. My concern is whether or not we have a parent in each one of those items that we put up coming and speaking to you next year during the budget process, so that we've done each of those as well as we have done Bright Connections. That's the obligation that we're taking on.
And I was just going to say the whole monitoring with the new teacher evaluation coming online. I mean, as you can see, we're not starting one program for the fall, we're starting 5 or 6 programs for the fall. And that may seem a bit ambitious, but with the support that I have from the administrators and some of the parents already in the community, I feel like it's something that we have to do. I mean, I don't think I could pick and choose what population or what students we needed to start with. This is something that hasn't been done for a very long time, and I feel strongly that all this has to be done now. So that's my biggest concern. It's a lot of work, but I feel like putting the work up front, and I feel like having the support of the administrators in the buildings who I think are excited about some of the work will be essential to it. But I think that would probably be my biggest concern at this point, that there's going to be a lot on the plate, but that's why we're here. So
yeah, I mean, I see this as an investment, okay, and it's investment in our community, it's investment in our programming, etc. But just like any investment, there's always things that you've got to watch out for. There's also, you want to make sure you invest enough so you're not setting up for failure. You also want to make sure that you are monitoring, and that if something's not working, that it changes. You just don't keep limping along for too long a period of time. Yeah. So for what you both have said, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
This sounds great. I think it's overall very responsive to the futures report, particularly sort of decreasing the paraprofessionals and increasing the teachers. The one area that struck me as a little bit discrepant from the report is the speech-language pathologists and mental health. And just a quote from the report, it says, using a benchmarking process, the numbers of SLPs and paraprofessionals are very high, and behavioral health providers encompassing social work, psychology, and guidance are at levels that are higher than expected. Yet this plan seems to be adding some speech and mental health professionals. So I guess just wondering if you could address that.
Yeah, sure. So I think I alluded to it a little bit before when I talked about the speech and language pathologists and the occupational therapists that we're going to be looking for are going to have very specific training. We will do some capacity building of our own, but because of the students that we're bringing into this program and the therapies that that they're going to require, we wanted to make sure we had just enough, like you had spoken about. We don't want to underinvest at this point, because we do have this potential savings and redesign and reallocation of the funding. We want to make sure. However, that being said, I think moving forward, we may need to look again at that for what we're providing for the entire district as opposed to just specific programs.
So basically, I mean, you can't reallocate these people because they don't have the skills within the district.
Well, we could build their capacity, but we felt in ensuring that the program, that another 0.25 in both of those areas would be helpful to specifically meeting essentially all the students that we're bringing back will have those services. So that is quite a bit of time that we're going to be bringing back.
So it's more specific to the group that's coming back, not necessarily
I get that.
overall.
It's just that the report was very definitive that we are at the very far end of the ratios of speech-language pathologists and at the high end in terms of ratios with social work and psychology.
Yeah.
So I just think, you know, while it's great that this sounds budget neutral, but you know, in response to that report, I'd just like to see why we need to
sure, and I could
actually raise the levels.
I could look a little bit, I mean, I could bring something that could show you a little bit closer how those services are going to be allocated for the fall.
Well, but I also think it speaks to something that Mrs. Brown and Mr. Ireland both said in different points. We did sit down and talk about how much of this is reasonable to do in 1 year and in one bite. And I think in part, you know, the headlines from the Futures Report were clearly about outplacements and local capacity and maybe at a next tier about the paras. And I think that to bring this much back into the district, we want to make sure that we have those in place successfully. And when they have, you know, settled and they are well established, then we can go ahead and I worry about the idea of trying to tackle every recommendation in the Futures Report, bringing stuff back and then under supporting those things. So we did look at sort of tiering the work, and quite honestly, I pushed pretty hard on can all of this happen in 1 year, and you heard the response. These are all things that have to happen right now. But there is more work in the Futures Report. There's clearly other layers of information there that we're going to have to address, but I don't know that we can address all of it in one fell swoop.
Right, and absolutely. And looking at the redesigning of our current services, you know, outplacements aside, and the way we're providing services for students right now, we started looking at that basically at the elementary level. There will be more work to be done at the middle school and the high school, but in the past 3 months, we wanted to start somewhere and, you know, structuring and scheduling students so that we can, you know, underneath the best practice model, but service them in their regular classrooms and reallocate. So there will be probably more savings in the way we're supporting students through the paraprofessionals versus a certified teacher. There will be closer looks at how we can push some of those speech and language and OT services into the classroom so they're more embedded in children's programs. And typically when you do that, you don't always need as much service. So I'd like, instead of...
The Futures Report was responding to a population that had 10 of our most needy students not here. And as we bring some of those students back, I'm going to want to remeasure those levels. If we've got 10 or 12 or in a few years 15 students in district who were out of district previously, our levels may not be as inflated as they were versus the baseline population. So I'd rather get the kids back and know we have the capacity to support them and then make those adjustments in year 2 or year 3 rather than making them up front and then maybe being understaffed.
And I understand staying sort of at the same level or reallocating. It just makes me a little uncomfortable to be adding these positions when the report specifically said we're overstaffed in those areas.
And some of them
especially if we decide like a year later we want to cut back, then the most recent ones we brought in would typically be the ones that go out.
And sometimes that information can be done on call. Sometimes, that information, those services can be provided by consult, so that it can be a 1-year contract, if that's what we decide we want to do. You know, we are also looking at models of bringing people in that can build our own staff's capacity, and I'm looking carefully at developing relationships with practitioners who do that, as opposed to want to provide all the service themselves. And, you know, that may be a piece of a program like that, where we could build our own staff's capacity for a year, and then let them run with it, and they may not need that, that level of support.
And I don't want to fail to underscore the fact that there is some reallocation taking place in this plan. The Futures, the Bright Connections program that came on this year did much within existing staffing. The alternative high school that we proposed for next year is done within existing staffing in large part, and there are some reallocations on here. When you net it all out, it does become an increase of approximately 3.5 positions, but that's with some elimination, that's with some increase, and it's with some reallocation within all of that. To do all of it and keep it staffing neutral and generating a savings, I just think is overly ambitious.
Well, again, too, I mean, we want to make sure our kids are our students
Right.
are successful when they come back to district. We want to build up a foundation for that because we know it's going to pay dividends down the road, both budgetary, have both budgetary impacts, but also on our students' success rates and their achievement levels. So, so I think that it's important to have an increase of resources, particularly in this first year, as you talked about, an investment when you're building a foundation, when you're building a system that then will pay dividends down the road.
I agree. Nothing would be worse than to bring some students back from very expensive outplacements and not have the services that those children need, and that would be poor at best.
It's not good for the child, it's not good for the parent, it's
But
not good for our staff.
I also want to say that there is a benefit that we rarely talk about having special needs students stay in Guilford. Obviously, it is financially to the taxpayer's best interest. Obviously, it's to the family's best interest not having a kid on a bus for a variable amount of time. But it's also, I think, in the regular education kid's best interest, because the model of out of sight, out of mind is not good. And having mentors and having regular ed kids in all levels see, work with, play with, learn with, and everything else with special needs student benefits everybody.
And it's the law.
Absolutely. Well, it's the law, but that's probably why it's the law, because it's a good deal for everybody.
For everybody, I absolutely agree.
The law sets a minimum standard, and very much like the concern that you identified of first, after your triage process, your concern is what you're going to do well, so that it has a infectious process where parents will be talking to parents and kids will be getting
Right, and
proper
I think,
education.
you know, as we continue, I should say, to shift these mental models and the way of thinking about things, we really need to move towards the true belief that all children can learn. And if they're not exposed to the curriculum that every other student is exposed to, then how do we expect them to perform in the same ways? Or how do we expect them to have understandings and thinkings and exposure to rich, rigorous instruction? And so it's essential that they have those experiences when they're able to, and that we support them and accommodate for them in these classes. So it's the right thing to do, as Dr. Freeman would say.
Let me ask a tangential question that's really more addressed to you. You know, we talked a lot this spring about all-day kindergarten and physical capacity. You're adding some positions here, and that I assume means adding classroom space. Is there an impact on possibility of all-day kindergarten?
Yes, it needs to be a consideration as we continue to wrestle with all-day kindergarten moving forward. As we look at these, we have looked at all of these programs. In fact, we've met with principals and walked their buildings to look at where things could be placed and where such programs could be housed. We know that we have the capacity to bring all of these online next year, and I know that full-day kindergarten continues to be a paramount concern for our elementary principals. We engaged in a rich conversation about it as recently as last week. So I know that they continue to have that in their thinking, but the quick answer is yes, it's going to be a consideration. And it was one of the considerations for sort of the forestalling it this year. We need to see what impact this has before we know about our capacity for space moving forward.
Let me phrase it a different way if I can. If we go down this road and it's a success, does this mean we cannot do all-day kindergarten within the existing physical plan?
No, it is a complication, but it is not a deal breaker.
Okay.
Right. And also my hope is that some of the special ed teachers, or many of the special ed teachers, will have a desk housed right in a regular classroom because they'll be co-teaching on a regular basis. They'll have dedicated teaching time in that classroom. The students in that classroom will consider them both teachers. And this is happening in many places here in Guilford now, but we'd like to really move that forward and really create inclusive schools and inclusive spaces for children and students.
We have a very motivated team that is still looking into and working on full-day kindergarten.
No, I'm sure there is, and you know, I would just hate to be talking in 8 months or 6 months, or when's the next budget cycle start? Next week?
Yeah.
You know, I just would hate to who have to say, gee, no, we're sorry, we can't think about that because we committed to doing this other thing.
No, but we'd be less than sincere if we didn't say that it's a complication. Obviously, space is a limited resource, and we will be making these decisions, and we've been thinking that as we've had the conversations about placing these. You picked up on that when you noted that one of the district-wide locations is now at LEAP, as opposed to, we need to look at where we place those district-wide supports so that we don't overburden any one school and overtax any one set of spaces.
Are you guys looking to put a longer-term plan? I mean, I know this is for now, for the next year. When do we expect something that's more 2-3 years, kind of looking forward?
I would think late into the summer we can have a more extended plan. There's already a list growing on Mrs. Brown's desk every time I sit with her of not for now but soon items that are there, and so we can certainly break those out for you and give you more of a forward look.
Yeah, and certainly we can extrapolate out over the years about the kids that we know that will age out, the students that we think might be good fits as programs grow, and or as kids graduate and or age out. We can start to make some better judgment about what a budget might look like in 2-3 years out.
And I think in response to both of those last two questions, we want to continue to talk with and collaborate with our neighbors. I think Strive is going to be an example of regional collaboration. And if we can enter into more of those relationships, we may find that we've got a district-wide Guilford program that can be housed in a neighboring school district. It could help relieve local space. It's still better than putting somebody on a bus to Milford or Stamford, but partnering with some of our neighbors, we may find more benefit in some of those relationships. People have expressed interest in some of the work that we've shared with you tonight, but not concrete enough that we want to put it out in the way that we've presented Strive.
Right, and I have talked to the directors, and I've known them for a long time, so we've had conversations about some different ideas around creating some of those things.
Is this what other districts do? Is similar districts, they have programs like this that has an impact on outplacements?
Every single district is different, and the district that I came from, in the 3 years I was there, that was a lot of the work that I did to accomplish some of the similar things. It actually freed up monies for other programs, sometimes general education programs, sometimes special education programs. So to answer, it doesn't answer your space question, but it helps to answer the all-day kindergarten question. But every district is very, very different, and they have a variety of a continuum of services, some of them having very little to others having more. So I think it kind of depends on the leadership at the time and sort of the goals of where they want to go to and move to.
Other questions, comments?
I would just, it's hard to imagine you haven't done this, but being the evaluator / statistical person. Really, it's great to have, for instance, a parent or parents come back to a Board of Ed meeting and talk about their experience in Bright Connections. But it would be also great to have really kind of information. This is what we set out to do. This is, you have 8 to 10 there. These are the number of kids we hoped to bring back when we set about with these programs. At the end of next year, be able to say, we got 7, or we got 10, or guess what, we got 12. Oh, yeah. To really have a sense of what the goals were for each of those several, as you stated, what were the goals? Were we able to come close to those, to reach those, to surpass those? What else came out of this that maybe we weren't expecting, et cetera? I think that would be, I would find that to be a really valuable.
Yeah, and I hope to come back to the board each year to have this conversation, just to update you as to where we are. What has been really successful, what are areas for improvement. How many students have come back, how many students we anticipate each year, and like I said, I hope probably even next fall to be able to, as we go through the budget process, to be able to make some estimates and some judgments, predictions on what will be happening the following year and the following year, and what possibly our tuition line will look like. Again, because students move in and out, those numbers are set in stone, but absolutely, and I think it'll be important to hear, to put some assessments or some progress monitor, so to speak, benchmarks in place about, what makes this program successful, why do we continue it, where does it need to improve. And I know that they're going through that process right now with Bright Connections, and they're looking at what's been really successful and how they can even improve more. So absolutely, that has to be part of this whole piece, yeah.
A few years ago when we started talking about an in-house autism program, which became the Bright Connections thing, and we were looking at Simsbury as a model, the conventional wisdom was that we are going to prevent outplacements, but we're not going to really be bringing kids back to Guilford. And I'm delighted that the conversation has now changed and that we're doing that and bringing kids back, because we're not just doing the Bright Connections, but we're doing all the other things you mentioned.
And I think you spoke a little bit about that when you said out of sight, out of mind. I think some people, certainly outplacements are not a long-term intervention. Outplacements are truly to regulate children, to provide what they need at that time, but the ultimate goal, we talked about the law philosophically, is children are best served in their home communities and their home schools. So, in accordance with IDEA, it's important that we're constantly looking at, is this child making progress at the place they're at? Are they doing what they've set out to do, which is ultimately to stabilize, to regulate, to possibly intervene with the student so that they're then ready and more prepared to come back to their home school. So I think that's a misnomer that an outplacement, a student is outplaced in 4th grade and that's their school. And because it's not what the intention of an outplacement is, although, some of the outplacements would like it to be. And, sometimes it's a very good connection for the family and parents. So, bringing every student back is not a realistic goal, and it will not happen. But certainly these types of supports and services can prevent outplacements, and we can, it's almost, I like to look at it as a gate almost. It can provide students with a way back into their schools without just dropping them back into the social demands, the academic demands. So it almost scaffolds their experience. And then when they're ready, we kind of build that in for them. We build those supports in for them. And then it's also a place before to really take a creative look, to do some diagnostic, maybe interventions or assessments before, as a last resort, we would look at an outplacement.
We're very excited about this work.
Listen, we've been struggling with this before you were here and before Dr. Porcella was here, frankly. This has been an issue that we have been struggling with as a district at 2 different levels. At the educational level, at the educational services level, providing the proper capacity within the district and trying to not have so many children educated outside town, but also obviously from the financial level too. The data is what it is and suggests that we are spending substantially more on outplacements than many comparable districts, and we all know that that's somewhat idiosyncratic. There could be one family or one group or whatever. I mean, we get that. On the other hand,
but every year the transportation and the tuitions go up too.
Yeah, and every year we budget X dollars, and every year we're over at the end of the year. And that line, that's the only line in the budget, only line that we are consistently substantially above the budgeted amount. For years, right? I mean, I don't recall ever there being a year that I've been on the board that we at the end of the year the number was lower than what we budgeted. And I think that's probably the only budget category that's in that situation. And as I said to Mike earlier, it can't be a coincidence. There's got to be a reason for that, and it can be the lack of local capacity. Fine, okay, could be a lot of issues, but I'm very encouraged that we are at least at the beginning of a plan, and I agree with Mr. Ireland. It would be really helpful to know what this looks like in 2 or 3 or 5 years in terms of staffing and in terms of impact on outplacements and space, because they're all related.
Right.
And I think now it may be budget neutral, but I think we do have to, as a board, vote to do the transfers among the categories. So I know you're not ready to do that tonight.
Right. We don't have a specific transfer ready, and
right.
But we wanted to give you an overview of our work, of our plan moving forward. The fact is that Mrs. Brown is meeting with these families now in informal conversations and informal PPTs. So we wanted to have the sense of the board moving forward, and we will have to prepare some formal transfers from tuition and into some staffing lines to make this possible for the year moving forward.
Right.
Sounds
good. Well, but I think you'd certainly have our support as long as the other half of it, the cause and effect are both
I
planned
understand
for.
that fully.
I'm sure. Well, thank you very much for we know that this was a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, frankly, I wish that the futures report had been a little more favorable, and we didn't have quite the opportunity to do this level of reform. But we're very grateful for the amount of effort that you put into this. And again, this has been one of the really one of the top 1 or 2 or 3 pressing, vexing, long-term, hard-to-solve problems, and hopefully this isn't a solution, obviously, but it sounds like it's a very good
But
first.
it's important work, and I look forward to having conversations with you about it as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. I know that my report is running long. I have just a couple other quick updates. We have received response from the state on our submitted teacher and administrative evaluation plans. The administrator evaluation, where we have agreed to pilot the state's plan, has been accepted without comment. Our teacher evaluation plan, I am pleased to report, it does require revisions, but as I have read through the feedback, it requires what I see as 4 very simple to achieve revisions, and in fact, I believe some of them are simply a more clear restatement of what I think is in the plan, but was missed, or the intent was missed by the reviewers. So in general, the large components of our plan, the pieces that I presented to you as priorities, or the pieces that I presented to you as significantly divergent from the state proposed plan, have all been accepted. We should be able to reconvene our committee, or a portion of our committee. We should be able to make the simple revisions, have the plan back to you, and resubmitted to the state by the June 21 date for resubmission. And I believe that we will have a viable teacher evaluation plan that meets the state's expectations, and I believe honestly does support all of the work that we continue to do in the school district. And it's not on the agenda, but I do want to remind the community that on Wednesday we have the State of the Schools report. There is a reception that will be highlighting both student work, particularly student art and artwork, as well as some of our community partners in educating our children in the town of Guilford. And that will be followed by a formal 7 o'clock presentation of our annual State of the Schools report. I just wanted to remind the community of that event this week.
Terrific.
And that completes
Before
my
we
report.
go to the next, while we're talking about state approval, could you update us on where we stand with the state approval for the Guilford High School plan?
Yes, we had received comments on those plans as well. Tomorrow night, I believe that we will hear that the comments have been completed, and I anticipate successfully reviewed by the state. That's not formal, but that's my anticipation for tomorrow night. The last series of communications prior to tomorrow night's meeting have us on track for bids hitting the street before the end of this month, that we have now entered into bid month, which is exciting to say that we're in the same calendar month as we expect our bids to be released. That's not formal, but that's my anticipation. I'll have confirmation tomorrow evening following the meeting and be happy to send it out to everybody.
Great.
Terrific. All right, board agenda, item 10.1 is to act on 4 personnel items. First of all, ratify the resignations for the purpose of retirement for Kathleen Helmrich, who's the library media specialist up at Jones, Walter Mayer, phys ed teacher up at Jones, and Lois Dillon, a language arts teacher at Adams, all of whom have 28 or more years of experience within the district. So
90 years of service.
Yeah.
90? I got 95 when I
Yeah,
added them up.
That's the first time I've heard the first name Walter used for Jomar.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
But I'm very happy to ratify these 3 people moving into retirement. They have been great assets to our town, and they've done a wonderful, wonderful job. I'm very happy to move them into retirement, too.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, well, I'm sure you'll notify them that that's been ratified, but with our deep thanks, yes, for all of their work. The 2 Jones teachers obviously taught my girls, and they spoke very fondly of both of them, and they will be missed. And then there is the non-renewal for staffing reduction of Rachel Martinich at the high school business education teacher. Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. 10.2 is to seek our somewhat less than the 40% promised under the special ed laws federal grant of $692,086 for Section 611 funds and $21,815 for Section 619 funds. Is there a motion that we submit the grant in those amounts?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And then 10.3, math curriculum. That's you.
Okay, this is a follow-up from January of 2013 where we presented to you a new format for a curriculum document. And I'd like to call it an educative curriculum because it really does give a lot more information to teachers so they know exactly what to teach with a lot of focus and a lot of rigor. Just as a brief history lesson, in 2003, our math curriculum was based on CMT strands. And we wrote everything to go with those 18 strands or 16 strands, depending on the grade level. In 2009, we changed to just the Connecticut standards, but they were very vague and not very specific. We did include a few examples in the 2009 curriculum. But with the advent of the Common Core State Standards, we felt it was very, very important to be more specific, to give teachers a lot more of the mathematical underpinnings so that they would really be able to dig deeply into the content. So this educative curriculum really supports students engaging in complex problems instead of sets of exercises. So Maria Carreri, who is our math specialist, has been leading this charge, and we are ready to present to you at least another quick overview of a completed document. The document that you have in front of you is only the draft for the consideration. It will be put online, but this is a draft that the public could see. They could see some of the research behind the grade level expectations, as well as a lot more of the features that Maria will describe to you. There will be a more significant document for teacher access that will be electronic. So we really want to use our technology in more efficient and effective ways as far as storing curricular materials. So with that, I'll turn it over
Just to make sure,
Ms. Ferreri.
the document that we got in PDF format, that 275
Yes.
pages, is this book?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But I just wanted you to have a hard copy because this is only a receive item for tonight. And so if you have questions from the public or the community and you needed to be able to look up something quickly, I thought, well, I'll make sure you have it in hard copy. But please feel free next month to return the notebooks to me, and I'll be glad to, because we try to keep at least one hard copy in the buildings. So there will be one will go to every school. And they'll also have the electronic version, of course. So, Maria, it's all yours.
All right. So we have been working as a committee with teachers from all 7 schools and the different grade levels working together to develop this. And I'm going to be jumping around in different grades to demonstrate some of the new features. So please feel free, and I'll have it up there, but it's much easier to read in front of you. So if you want to be flipping around, I won't think you're being rude.
In your folders, you have some blown up copies of the slides you'll be seeing tonight to help make it easier to read.
Thank you.
So the two main features that you're going to see that seem, well, to begin with, we first looked at the current Guilford curriculum and thought about what was really strong that we wanted to keep and what really still fit well with the Common Core standards. So you'll see in the beginning, you'll still see the philosophy statement, the guiding principles with just slight changes to meet the Common Core, which is really reassuring that the philosophy that we've been using aligns really well already without having to make too many tweaks. And some of the language and structure is still the same, but looks quite different, which is one of those overarching things that has changed. There's much more professional learning. It's not just a few ideas. There's much more depth that we'll take a look at. And then the other component that you guys won't see, but we'll look at how it's going to look online, is the evidence of learning section that has different tasks that teachers can go to for each unit. And we felt a great need to do this because our programs don't 100% align, and no programs out there do 100% align right now. And so we're looking to find what's best as we move forward, but if we're jumping in next year, we need to give them quality resources and identify them. And this is a piece that's going to be growing and living as almost the entire country is creating really rich tasks. We didn't want to say, oh, we're only going to use our one curriculum resource. We wanted to have access to those and help teachers to find and share those in an online way. So, as we look at the different and new features, all of the Common Core authors said if you are doing anything and you don't see these three shifts evident in the work that you're doing, something is awry. And so I wanted to make sure as we were doing this and as the committee worked together that we really had a strong understanding of these three and that they would be a part of all the different components. And maybe it's just inherent, or maybe it's really explicit, so you'll see both of those as we look through it. And so just to review, those three shifts are a much greater focus at each grade level. Instead of covering everything each year, we're clearly spelling out what each grade is responsible for. Coherence, which means both thinking and making connections across grades, and then also within grades, linking those major topics together. And then the third one is rigor, and rigor applies to three areas: conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and real-life application. So with respect to the first one, focus, each grade level, this is grade 4, starts with a grade level overview, and this is straight from the Common Core document that clearly spells out what the major work of the grade is. And then also starts with the 8 math practices, which are those habits of mind that we want to see in every classroom. And so there's no getting around it. Teachers can clearly read this, see what's up there, know what their grade level focus is immediately. And we also know that this is going to be really critical as we move into the new Smarter Balanced assessments. Like you guys saw in the task design, in the bag task that we did where we designed those bags, there's no longer questions where it's just an individual standard. It's these big concepts. We know that the major questions for each grade level will be based on the major work, and then the practice standards are going to be the major part that's being assessed of whether kids can really explain and reason about these big ideas. And we just did a Connecticut Common Core aligned practice test at a couple of the elementary schools, and we really saw this evident that it was the major work. They were much more thoughtful questions, and so we want to make sure that that's apparent to all of the teachers immediately when they open their documents. The next piece of focus that as they turn, they'll see a new piece that shows in a pie chart the instructional time throughout the year of what they should be, of how the units fit together as a whole. And you can see, so this is first grade, and as you look around, I think there's only 7%, 18%, good math skills, that doesn't apply to addition and subtraction, which is the major work of first grade. And so it's really visually apparent to them what they need to be working on. And you can see it from the other grades too as you flip through. And then another, as you get into actually looking at the standards, another support to be able to really see the focus. And this is something that was a part of the old curriculum document, or the current curriculum document. The student will be able to, that lists the standards. And then the second part, the teacher will use appropriate instructional strategies, approaches based on the needs of the student. And in here, this part is that right column is much more fleshed out than it used to be. It was often just a list of just good teaching strategies, and now this much more clearly spells out what the math is. And so this structure, oh, and then the other part is that component cluster. So we've got our individual standards on the left, the component cluster that keeps the big idea in mind, and then on the right, spells out what those big ideas are, really makes it clear what teachers need to be teaching and what it looks like in a classroom. So you've got the big idea, but then also clearly what it's going to look like. The next shift is coherence. And so that coherence, when we start to set the big, being able to see the connections amongst all the years, this is a new feature, being able to see each grade, what it looks like as a whole, and it's color-coded to be able to see where the focus of the grade is. So for example, if I'm a third grade teacher and I'm starting my first units on multiplication division with factors 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10, and I want to think, well, what does second grade need to know now? I'm not sure, this is new to me. They can really quickly see, skim down second grade, oh, there's unit 6, preparation for multiplication and division concepts. They can go to the online resource, click on the second grade document, see what those standards are, see what some of the tasks they may have done would be, and then be able to use that to inform their third grade instruction. And then as they get into their own document, this is definitely new, and it's a big shift to be, for each grade level, we put the standards in a specific unit order. We felt it was really important to do this for a number of reasons, because those standards build on themselves throughout the year, and there is a coherent story to tell. We wanted to help teachers and put them in order for them with the help of this committee, making sense out of, does this grow together? This is second grade, and you can see how it really builds up. Fluency with sums and differences to 20, add and subtract numbers to 100. Then we've got some application, adding and subtraction of length and time measurements. Place value counting and comparison of numbers. Now we're going up to 1,000 of just that number concept, and then addition and subtraction with those numbers, so it just really clearly builds on itself. And then this also ensures that teachers will teach all of this within the year because it's mapped out for them. But that said, we haven't tried this yet. We're going to need to make tweaks to the order and see how it makes sense to the time that it takes. We're not sure how long it's going to take. It's all still pretty new. So we also wanted to be able to make connections. This is another part of the professional learning part and that instructional strategies side. It's pulled out differently looking here. This is a 5th grade standard on volume, and really clearly spelled out as the connections that are made to previous grades. So volume is no longer just this isolated skill. You can see in the red, in 3rd grade, students begin working with area and covering spaces. The concept of volume should be extended from area with the idea that students are covering an area, the bottom of the cube, with a layer of unit cubes, and then adding layers of unit cubes on top of the bottom layer. So it's just this really clear connection that helps teachers see what those connections are if they haven't thought about that, if they've been teaching 5th grade forever, and then also will help students have a stronger, richer understanding of that. Similarly, within units, if there's a major work, so this is 4th grade, major work is with whole number quotients and multiplication, in that same unit, there's a measurement standard working on area, and certainly we never would have mixed those things up before. Area would have been in a measurement unit, totally separate, and now we're really seeing what those connections are with the example. For example, from the width of a rectangular room given the area of the flooring and the length, by viewing the area formula as a multiplication equation with an unknown factor. So they're really seeing that relationship of multiplication and division through a real-life application. Just much richer than we've ever done it before. The 3rd shift, again, is rigor and has those 3 components: conceptual understanding, fluency, and then real-life application. And this is really where the right side column is going to come into play with the strategies for teachers to really see these connections. So with conceptual understanding, this one and the next one both are showing how we're doing both of those things with these concepts. So this is just a multiplication standard with whole numbers and with decimals and fractions. And you can see in the red, this standard includes students' reasoning and explanations of how they use models, pictures, strategies. This understanding can be reinforced by connecting addition of decimals to their understanding of addition of fractions. So there's all these connections that are really clearly spelled out for teachers. But then, if we're working on procedural skill and fluency, same thing, it's going to spell out what that means, especially if it's a non-traditional understanding of what these words mean. Fluency used to just be get the right answer. But they'll clearly spell out when it's something that is more rigorous than what it used to be. This standard refers to fluency, which means accuracy, correct answer, efficiency, a reasonable amount of steps, and flexibility. And I think that flexibility is something that we're not as comfortable with or used to. So using strategies such as distributive property or breaking numbers apart, also using strategies according to the numbers in the problem. So 26 times 4, we're not just doing that one way. If there's a faster way, if you can think, oh, I know 25 times 4, and then it's one more 4. Or 32 times 4, oh, I just know I can think of that as 64 times 2. Being able to have a flexible strategy and understanding of that. And then the last part of rigor is application, and this is really similar to what you saw before, where if there's a very mathy concept, this is 7th grade, expressions and equations, use properties of operations to generate equivalent expressions. Some kids, this is where we start to lose them. Is there a real life application that we can see where this is applied? And so we've got a geometry standard in the same unit 2. Solve real life and mathematical problems involving angle measure, area, surface area, and volume. And if you have some missing components in those, you can see how you could be using formulas and connecting it to solving algebra and making sense out of that. So how does this all look in practice? So that is the major structure of just within the document, but teachers will also have access to an online piece. Where's it? And so in this online piece, there will be the curriculum document, and then also embedded within the curriculum document for each unit is an evidence of learning section, which is broken into 4 areas. So Anne, will you click on that first one at the very top, grade 6?
This one?
Yep. Oop, going off. So it starts off just looking like the regular curriculum document with the major work of the grade. And then as you scroll down, you can see the same components, the units. This looks like Space Wars, Star Wars. So this is the first unit, and you can see it all looks the same. Keep scrolling. And then we get to, okay, stop there. Go back up just a little bit. Sorry. This is this is the evidence of learning section, and just above that is the standards listed out that they would need from 5th grade to be successful with this unit. Those are the scaffolding tasks, and they can go back and look those up from the 5th grade document. And then it moves into constructing tasks, which is where they're building the concepts of the unit. And then if you scroll it down, the practice tasks, which is where they'll be putting those concepts into practice and application. And then at the end, performance tasks. This one's not complete quite yet, so this is something we're still building. So go back, stay on that first unit. So let's say I was a 6th grade teacher and I wanted to teach that, right there it says, build understanding of ordering, no, that's not it, NS4. Scroll up just a little bit more. Hang on. Where is it? Scroll down. Well, go back to the other one. Highlight there. Sorry, just to the main page. If you press the back arrow. Oh, because we're in Unit 2, Ian. Scroll back up to Unit 1. There it is. Okay, thank you. So let's say I was working on the numbers sense, the 4th standard where it says develop understanding of how to find the greatest common factor of 2 whole numbers less than or equal to 100 and the least common multiple of 2 whole numbers less than or equal to 12. Well, what does that mean? I could go back to the original document and read some of the professional learning part that's in there, and if I want a task to go with that, they're listed out there, 6th grade task folder, year of the snake, and so I could go back if I use my back button. And if I look at all the constructing tasks, I'm going to skim down until I see where it says year of the snake. And if I scroll down, it takes me to a pretty cool task that somebody has developed around how the years of the snake work in a factoring multiple sort of way. And so it's a neat task. It's really rich and pretty spelled out for the teacher as to how they should implement it. And then, so say I've worked on this, I've processed it, I'm going to use this in my classroom. Now I want the kids to be able to practice it on their own. They've got the concept down. So I'm going to go back. And I could go back to the original document. I can look just at the practice standards and look for which of those match up and see what suits for me. So let's say I wanted to do the secret number one. It's towards the bottom. And again, it's just a set of really rich questions that I can use and figure out a way to use as a resource in my classroom if it doesn't already align well with the resources that we have. And the resources that we have are all now partitioned out into the units. So all the everyday math lessons are put into, and they can see which ones go well in each unit. All the CMP2 are spelled out and put into it. And high school is just a little bit different with respect to that. But they've got a similar structure to theirs as well. And then in the end, there are performance tasks for each unit, which are those longer, similar to the bag design type tasks.
First, I'd like to commend you on your eyesight.
I was just going to say.
Sorry.
I didn't expect it, but just get a sense of it.
The other thing is, as a sixth grade parent, as opposed to teacher, are you guys expecting to put some of this stuff available for parents?
Yes, so everything that you guys have will be online and available.
This stuff will not.
Not the,
Right.
the tasks. We don't want you to go towards them. Don't find that you're the snake.
No. But how do we help them?
The parents.
Yes.
That's a next step
Okay.
of what we need to figure out.
Okay.
Definitely.
I just want to
Yeah.
make sure it's
But
part
that it is there, and it is complex language.
I mean, we have to reteach
But it's
ourselves.
much more so than we've ever had spelled out what we're asking students to do and what it's going to look like. It's a much more communicative than we've ever had before.
I mean, as a parent, you're relearning some things
Right.
that you might have forgotten.
Or learning
If you think sixth grade is hard.
or learning
They
the
don't have those
concepts.
shows
right?
about, your fourth graders and, how to compete with the kindergarten and lose. No, so just, there's always help, because I know parents are always saying, what do we do? Is, somebody's struggling with something, I want to help them. I want to give them more exercises or have them do more work. But where do we go for those resources? And the worst thing is to go, unfortunately, you go online, you look for them, and you're now teaching them wrong things, which you don't want to have happen.
One of the things, just to remind you, that the whole idea of the curriculum document itself is informative. The research is involved, the understanding, the background knowledge is built in for the very first time. So even if a parent sees that their child is having difficulty with a particular concept or something is going on in school, they can actually read it, throughout the unit, which is all connected and coherent together, and actually find out what's the underlying mathematics and may be able to help their child through that. But like you say, we're going to have to do a lot of parent work. It was really, really important that we felt that our teachers are really clear about what the expectations are for the grade level. We're going to be trying this out. We've spent a year trying to pull this together in the most comprehensive curriculum that we've ever done. And actually, this will be on an intranet site so that teachers will have access to all these rich tasks, and they will be consistent. So it won't be that, we're not telling them how to teach it, but we're saying these are the very clear expectations, and here are the resources to help you get there, but knowing that we're going to be building these resources all the time. You probably saw the last one. It was from the Georgia Department of Education. Georgia, Arizona, some states have really done a remarkable job putting those tasks out there. And so that's one of the beauties of the Common Core State Standards, is that we can all share and we can all look and see what is best and really make some decisions around those. And so that's been
And so possibly for the first time ever, we're in a situation where boards of education in 44 other states are asking the same question, and we know that we will need to start providing parent resources and a parent portal and may be able to borrow from other states who get there a little ahead of us and not have to create it wholly and uniquely for Guilford and Connecticut because our curriculum is different from everybody else's.
Yeah, I mean, you can, you get the manual for your car. It's still better to go look at YouTube on how to change your oil. You know what I mean? It's just.
And we just want to speak for a minute about the high school piece because it does look just a little bit different.
Back to the PowerPoint.
For the secondary level, what Common Core does is take 120 standards and divide them into 6 categories. That doesn't exactly work for every single high school. As you might imagine, we have to take and figure out how it works for Guilford. Part of the reason for doing that is that nationally you have schools that still do an integrated program of 3 levels of math at the high school, and they integrate all Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 into those 3 courses. We still have a separate sequence, and we're going to maintain that. So the challenge of the high school was to take the 120 standards that are in the 6 categories and figure out how they fit in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. Those are the 3 courses that will be guaranteed and viable for all students in Guilford. And eventually, when the state gets their act together, those will also be the exit exams. But that could take a while. Funding is a problem. At this point in time, we have the standards all divvied up, and we've gotten a really good, solid practice run this year with the 3 courses. At this point, we're developing the evidence of learning section. We have all the pieces and all the teachers' plan books. Now it's a matter of putting them all together into the single document. So that's where we are at the secondary level.
For example, Calculus AB and Calculus BC, those will still be in place?
Yes.
So if a kid is going to make it to Calculus BC as a senior, what would the series of courses be?
At this point in time, they probably would be accelerated and be taking algebra in 8th grade. And then at some point in time in the high school sequence, they're probably going to end up doubling up.
So they have to double up in the high school in order to do that?
Some students also take enrichment courses over the summer, but doubling up seems to be the measure. And Common Core will actually tell you that you can double up in the geometry and algebra 2. So that would be the natural place to do so and still get to BC.
You don't think that some kids are maybe more ready for algebra earlier on to avoid doubling up? And
if the new standards weren't so incredibly rich for grades 7 and 8, and knowing that they have to take assessments in grades 7 and 8, I would say maybe. But now looking at those new standards, they're pushing so much regular algebra into grade 8 that it's going to be a really rich experience, and we're trying to come up with a way to take, and Maria can address this more because she's worked with the people at Adams, take the standards from grade 7 and some of the standards from grade 8 and do those in grade 7, so that when we get to algebra in 8th grade, we can do the rest of the 8th grade standards and the algebra standards. We're taking 3 years of really rich material and trying to bring it into 2. To go any tighter, I think the kids would pop.
Good evening. I'm a member of the committee, and I'm also a high school math teacher. I spoke to you last time with Maria and Donna. And I just wanted to go back to your question about how could parents get support with the document. As a teacher, I know that, as they explained, that it's giving us a lot more very concrete, specific guidance about how our curriculum is aligned to the Common Core state standards. And that left-hand column that you see in the document, it specifically gives you the standard from the Common Core state standards. So if you go to the Arizona document, or if you go to the New York State document, or the Connecticut document, or the Guilford math curriculum, they all have the same standard. So if you are a parent and you know that your child is taking Algebra 2, for example, and all the Algebra 2 teachers are going to be approaching the curriculum in that same sequence. If they're in the statistics unit, for example, which is the last unit in the document, You can look up that particular standard, go online, and there will be tons of resources. In the back of the document that you guys have, there's also a list of sources that were used to put together, that we used as resources in our research. So by having those very specific standards delineated in the document, you can easily go find lots of things that will align with that directly, instead of kind of guessing and saying, well, it's algebra, so I'll go look up something about algebra. It'll give you a very specific standard that you can refer to. Just wanted to share that.
And then, so for next steps, we know there's going to be a huge professional development piece around this. Even with all this professional learning, it certainly doesn't alleviate the need for us to be working with teachers, helping them to process this document and to plan out these units. So awareness for staff, guidance around the use of the electronic materials, and implementation support over the course of the next years, decades, centuries. Alignment to progress reports, so that's another parent communication piece. And again, there's going to be much revision and fine-tuning. This is something that's growing across the country, and it's not going to be a finished piece like they've been in the past.
Do you guys align this to Power School as well? So in other words, we get stuff at Power School. It kind of says they did, had a test, okay? And this is the test they took, and there's a title on that test. Does that align with some of the things that you guys are putting out there, so us as a parent understanding can go back here and say, this piece didn't, maybe didn't do so well on that, need a little more work, and then actually then go find it within the...
I think it will eventually, especially not next year, but the following year. There will be a whole item bank of questions that Smarter Balance is putting out of tasks that they're using that will be very clear to navigate and create assessments that really clearly align and that we'll be able to communicate more clearly. So next year is going to be making our way through that before the tests haven't been created yet. So we're sort of flying a plane while it's being built. So that communication piece, it might just be one more year before that's really clear. Yeah.
Just going back to the teacher end of it, so if I'm teaching a unit on one of the units that are in the curriculum, and I list that on Power School, I would name it according to the unit that I'm on. So I would name it rational functions, for example.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm just asking if since they're going to some changes in those, how they're titling them, are we going to go back to make sure the title's the same?
Right, exactly. And that makes total sense. And when I say I would name it, we also remember we work within PLCs in our courses.
We're all doing it.
So right, so we'll be having common assessments, which we already do. We have common assessments. So all the Algebra 2 teachers would be developing common assessments for each unit, and that would be what we all, we would be sharing data on that within our PLC, and that's what we would all be listing on Power School as well.
Good.
So if somebody, if students in different Algebra 2 courses have different teachers, they'll still have the same common assessment that they can say, yes, we both struggled on this assessment, or we can help each other on this unit.
Well, this is just received tonight, so we'll take a chance and we'll get this up on the website soon. I think we all understand a little more clearly for a couple of things. One is how much work you all have done as a committee to put this together. This doesn't just happen. We understand that, and we appreciate your work on it. I think I'm gaining a deeper appreciation of the I don't know what the right word is, the concern that teachers have raised about the Common Core state standards and the amount of professional development. Because as I look at this, there's no teacher in the district that's going to be able to use their old math plan, right? I mean, everybody starts over, right? Well, okay. Well, I think that's probably true, isn't it? And so yes. I think we need to. I think this makes pretty clear to me, I think, some of the things we've heard from the teachers about what we're going to need to do as a district in terms of professional development and support and lesson plan creation and then oversight, as we move forward. So.
You noted earlier that tonight was an agenda that was rich in teaching and learning.
Yeah, well,
there's a lot of information that's being shared with you this evening.
Right. Well, good. So is the thought that we'll carry this over to next month and then?
Yes, that's correct. And we will have a hard copy available at Lathrop House, as well as putting a PDF of the draft online, and each of you, of course, have a hard copy as well. So that, if anyone has any questions or wants more information or has some concerns about, a particular thing, we can probably respond, or we'll try to respond. Like we say, this document is living and breathing. It will change, it will evolve, but the structure we hope will remain the same. We will embellish the task as we find new tasks, but we want to make sure that teachers have the richest, the best material and the best kind of curriculum to work from. Because this is the what, it's not the how, but we want to make sure that the what is clear and that it is aligned with the expectations for all of our students across the nation, so that we can be globally competitive in mathematics and in science. And that's our goal.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
All right, I think that's it for the board agenda. 11, unfinished business. 12, committee reports, policy committee, anything going on?
No, nothing new to report. We had to.
We will be meeting before the next workshop.
Okay.
Yes.
Facilities?
Yeah. We did, the SBC recommended ISIS to the Board of Selectmen for the award for the facilities needs assessment, so that's moving along. They also, just to give you an update, obviously we're going into the summer, and going into the summer there's a lot of work that's going to start going on at a lot of the schools. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview. The SBC approved moving forward with bathrooms at Jones per the facility subcommittee recommendation to use the balance of funds in the old bond for that purpose. Also made a recommendation to enter into a contract for the HVAC work in the south end of Adams Middle School, and that's going to the Board of Selectmen at the next meeting as well. Other projects, AMS, Middle Adams, repointing ceiling replacement of expansion joints, placing the booster pump at Jones. Oh, here's a unique one, the clocks at Adams Middle School.
Oh, yay!
The what?
Clocks.
Clocks.
They've been off a little for a couple of years.
Right, twice.
Not working, Gary.
They've gone through a few cycles on that one, no pun intended. They're looking, we're going to talk at the next facility subcommittee meeting to look at funds for bond for replacement of a diesel tank in the bus yard. All kinds of fun stuff going on.
Okay, sounds good. Finance committee, anything other than?
Mrs. Renner presented the financials. The other thing the committee's been working on is newer formats for presenting financial data, and that we're in the beginning process of examining other districts' reports, and we're going to, Mrs. Renner, I, and the staff are going to meet and look at about 10 other districts and how they report their finances. And then we'll involve Mr. Hoey and the Board of Finance and come up with a format that is meaningful to us and to the citizens of Guilford.
Okay, terrific. Liaison to building committee, high school building committee, we did get a little bit of news on that. Anything else?
That's the big news.
Okay. Yeah. That's the big news. All right. Town committee liaisons, is there any report from any of those? All right. Public questions, anybody? Please.
Wow.
Just waited patiently.
Hey, can we mark this as a first?
Hi, Mark Gahn, 810 Moose Hill Road. I think it probably is known I'm also a music teacher here at the high school and at Adams. First, I just want to thank the board and the administration for their support of the music department, for the trust that you place in us with these trips that we take all over the place. It's become an important part of our program, and you know, we do appreciate the trust you give to us when we take these students abroad. I do want to, he's not here anymore, but I would want to elaborate on Mr. Mazzeni's comments about the students that received the award tonight. Both students are members of the performing groups here at the high school as well. It didn't get mentioned in their little bios, but they're very important members of those organizations. And since the topic of valedictorians also came up, I wanted to share also a piece of information that my colleague Tom Boats discovered while doing some research, and that is that since the year 2000, every single valedictorian has been a member of one of the performing groups at the high school, with the exception of one. And he was a valedictorian a year when there were 2 valedictorians, and the other person was a member of one of the performing groups. And that includes this year's valedictorian, who, though he doesn't play an instrument in our groups, is a composer of some acclaim, and his works have been premiered by our musical groups. Quite an exceptional young man. Last, I'm going to put on my parent hat, and this is where the question comes in. I have 2 daughters, one of whom is a first grader at Cox and one of whom will be in kindergarten next year. And my first grader, you know, she loves school, she loves her teachers. She's always more excited when I bring her to school than when I pick her up. And that's a wonderful feeling as a parent, and I commend that school. You may or may not be aware that the music teacher at Cox, Ann Lead, is retiring at the end of this year. And my understanding is that that full-time position has been replaced by a .8 position. To be honest, I don't know enough about this whole thing to really be able to comment or express any concern. But I am, I guess, wondering as a parent and as a teacher in the district, could anyone share the rationale why this 2/10 of a teacher, which seems small on paper, but when you consider that 2.2 teachers service music instruction for all of our elementary schools, that .2 is a big piece. So I guess I'm curious as to the rationale, and will it impact instruction? How it will impact instruction in terms of teaching time?
And before we answer, we need to take a very short break because we need to change the DVD.
That wasn't on tape.